Neptune missiles destroyed a Moscow power plant. Do you know how big a chunk they broke off from that power plant?
Due to the emerging threat of the Ukrainian armed forces using long-range unmanned aerial vehicles, there is now a risk of important critical infrastructure being hit.
Sobyanin has been ordered to urgently inspect Moscow's bomb shelters, and churches would do better to pray for protection from tomahawks. More than 200 drones attacked Russia in a single night already. For the fifth day in a row, we are attacking Moscow, approaching, and have shifted our focus back to the energy sector. Holy shit, fuck, unbelievable, fuck. There, it hit fucking hell. The power system is screwed. It's cracking, and for the first time, Moscow is in darkness. Damn, this is a mess, people, and at night there are strikes on the CHP and oil refineries. Fuck. It's really scary. It hit this hard back when it was going down at Gokovsk. Fuck, it's really scary. It was so loud, yeah. It exploded. The thermal power plant exploded there. Eagle. There was a thermal power plant explosion. Corridor. What's happening? There was a thermal power plant explosion. Vladimir Yaroslavl, everything is on fire. That's it. It's burning here. And I'm there, the bastard. Russia is entering a phase of energy collapse. We'll discuss all this with the well-known journalist Olesya Batsman. Friends, well, what a wonderful gift for St. Nicholas Day. A night of total strikes on Russia. In Chechnya, the Grozny city complex was blown up. A powerful strike destroyed floors of the skyscraper where the Chechen Security Council, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Justice, the Election Commission, and the United Russia Reception Office are located. The office of the Chechen Law Enforcement and Oil and Petrochemical Industry. Well, in short, Putin and Kadyrov are in a panic. Massive strikes on the Krasnodar region. There was an attack on the Temryuk seaport in Crimea, destruction, MiG-29s, 124 blown up. We are attacking refineries, oil processing plants, the Druzhba oil pipeline, gas terminals, oil loading ports, and even Grozny, for the third time in a row already. And of course, the results of the talks, the outcomes of Dmitriev, Putin, and Kushner in the Kremlin, as well as the retaliatory strike. Regarding the sanctions strike by the US, we'll discuss this with journalist Olesya Batsman. Olesya, glad to see you.
Dasha, hello, I'm glad to see you too. And good evening to all our viewers.
Friends, well, Olesya and I always meet every weekend. And these are the holiday weekends, St. Nicholas Day. Indeed, the armed forces of Ukraine are giving us gifts, but unfortunately, Trump is not giving us any gifts. I've been waiting for sanctions, but there are still none. Olesya, how do you assess the two tracks? The first track is our military strikes, and then the second track. That's the diplomatic one, because Politico published an article today saying that Putin likes it when people beg him for peace. And right now it feels like Trump is begging him for peace, but he just won't agree.
No, it's nothing. Trump isn't begging him and isn't going to beg him. He's not in that position. No matter how much we talk about his good attitude toward Putin, he absolutely has a sense of self-worth. No, that's not it. It's not about self-worth here. It's more about what he can do, what he can influence, what kind of power he has. Power and might are concentrated in his hands. And accordingly, based on this, he understands, well, listen, when he himself, his ministers say that the entire Russian economy is equal to the economy of a single American state. Just take Texas. That's your Putin right there. Trump is very good at counting, believe me. So in this regard, he evaluates everything correctly. He judges things properly. Of course, Putin is already making him really angry. But for now, you see, he's still dragging things out, trying by any means, one way or another, to get closer, to bring Putin to a peace deal. In reality, everything is indeed going down the precise path we extensively talked about with you. That is, unequivocally towards significant sanctions against Russia and towards providing us with crucial new types of advanced weaponry. We're on this path, but it's a long and difficult road for us. Along the way, all sorts of things come up. For example, you see how this so-called peace agreement just popped up, supposedly American, but it turned out to be Russian, with 28 points, which we also have to fight against, break down, offer alternatives, develop responses, and get anxious about. On this path, all kinds of things come up, for example, like what was just published now, the American security strategy, where there's also little that's pleasant written regarding our issue and what all the responsibility and obligations have been completely shifted onto Europe. And with Russia, on the contrary, relations should be normalized, trade should resume, and there should be no war. Well, yes, it's clear everyone's like that. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that the people who wrote this strategy are the same ones who will later be involved in some scandals. They'll simply become figures in scandals or tapes. Some things will come to light. This has happened more than once in the White House, so I won't be at all surprised if that's how it turns out. So I repeat, for now, we're not reacting to this. We just keep doing our job. What's important to us? What's important to us is, above all, that the exchange of intelligence information doesn't stop, that the weapons we receive, the ones Europe buys from America and gives to us, the ones Europe produces itself and gives to us, what matters is that they keep coming. And accordingly, the most important thing, which I want to emphasize now, is that our guys on the front lines hold their ground. In other words, the more successful they are, the better we'll be able to hold our position and defend Ukraine's interests. On the diplomatic front, where essentially agreements are signed, certain points are discussed, and the new architecture, the future world order, is being debated. But by no means the other way around, because it is precisely the situation on the battlefield that determines these positions. Our strength depends on how united we are, whether we are willing or unwilling to make concessions or give something up, you see? Yes, of course, there were some unfortunate leaks following the conversation between Volodymyr Zelensky and the European leaders. Not that the leaks themselves are bad, but rather what we learned from them. Because you see, there was nothing sensational in it. But all of this confirms what we've been saying. And the European leaders, Macron, Stubb, Scholz, and Starmer, are very concerned that America might abandon Ukraine right now, and that pressure could be put on Zelensky. They use words like betrayal, saying that this could be a betrayal of Zelensky, and that somehow he needs to be protected. Ukraine shouldn't agree to what America is about to propose. You see, it's like, that's absolutely right. That's great. I just have one question. What exactly is each of these European leaders ready to do about it? How exactly are they prepared to help us? Besides declarations, besides words, yes, besides the fact that they themselves are calling Trump, trying to persuade him, convincing him, giving him arguments. That's very important. By the way, that's really important, and thank you for that. But aside from that, what else? I mean, what can be done in terms of weaponry? What can be done in terms of personnel in general? Well, what's the problem? Look, private ones. There are military companies, private armies that aren't directly affiliated with any particular state, but they can include citizens from France, Italy, and Britain. What's the problem with forming these battalions? You see, there are a lot of people who want to come to Ukraine and fight. I mean, citizens of the European Union. So, all these things. What's the problem with closing the Ukrainian sky? Explain it to me. It's not about shooting down anything over Russian territory. No. They don't come into contact with Russia in any way at all. They are defending Ukraine, their closest ally and partner. Moreover, we're talking about the sky that borders their own. So they're actually defending their own sky because literally, well, how else can I put it? How many times has it already happened by now? Russian drones have flown over, landed, and crashed on the territory of Poland, Moldova, and Romania, and so on and so forth. Well, is this the first time? So they have to protect their own airspace. Why should they react to some words from Putin saying that this can't be done because then Europe will be at war with Russia? That's how we'll see it. And what else are you going to consider? So what's next? Do you see?
Of course. I completely agree with you, absolutely. You know how they call it now, the coalition of the decisive, the coalition of the indecisive? That's a standard topic. The coalition of those leaving and those determined, which is also the coalition of the indecisive, NATO, not action talks only. Kuma, you want me as much as I fear you. You see, look, this is a very important point. Yes, you're absolutely right. I read a column by Valery Zaluzhny, the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. He said that basically there is no strategy for waging war right now. Why? Everyone is discussing that we should be engaging in peace negotiations. Peace negotiations mean no mobilization. We aren't being given weapons because we're on the peace track. And Putin is taking advantage of this. So now, as I read this authoritative opinion, it turns out that Putin is deliberately creating this peace negotiation track so that he can advance, attack, and terrorize. And Europe and the US together were saying, well, Ukraine should be on the peace track. So why should it advance? Why should it attack? Why does it need weapons? And that's exactly what Putin needs right now. This is what reputable American and European media have written, and this is what General Zaluzhny is talking about, that a strategy for victory is needed, a strategy of war, a policy of war. In other words, if we are at war, then we are not talking about peace negotiations. I'd like to discuss this with you because it's very important, since these are two completely polar opposite points of view. The peace track and war.
Well, here, how should I put it? I'll reconcile you with everyone, because I'll say that these are two parallel tracks, which, if we want to win, well, to achieve a just peace, let's put it that way, we have to pursue in parallel simultaneously, and both of these directions must be priorities for us. That's the task at hand. Because first, let's start from the beginning. What should the foundation be? The foundation should be a strong Ukraine, a strong military Ukraine, and as a result, our position on the front line. That's why everything related to the war must proceed continuously and without any looking back at all. No matter who is negotiating about what or where, for now, we keep moving forward. It's not like the moment a treaty is signed, everything stops and we cease fire. On land, in the sky, at sea. And then a different life begins, in the sense that after the ceasefire, the details and terms of the peace agreement are worked out, but for now, everyone stays in their positions, but no one is shooting. Up until that very moment, until Ukraine agrees to such a ceasefire, a mutual one. We have to fight as if nothing at all is happening over there, for the diplomats. In other words, we shouldn't pay attention to that, because I repeat, the stronger we are at the front, the better we fight, the easier it will be for our diplomats in those offices. You know where? They meet with the American, European, and Russian delegations. At the same time, while our military is fighting, our diplomats must conduct these peace negotiations and come to some agreements. But as long as these talks are ongoing, no one is tying anyone down, no one is twisting anyone's arms, restraining or stopping anyone, because if that were to happen, it would mean defeat both on the battlefield and diplomatically, and ultimately a loss for all of Ukraine in the war as a whole. Do you understand? Because let me repeat, only a successful Ukraine on the battlefield can lead to a successful Ukraine in terms of a peace agreement that is favorable to us. That's it. There simply are no other options. That's why these are two stories that, I repeat, must develop simultaneously, move forward together, and be implemented at the same time. That's all.
Look, what now? What did Putin say in India? He will keep fighting, in his view, for Novorossiya, the so-called Novorossiya as he sees it, and for Donbass. He will take it. That's his perspective. In his view, the war will go on. There's supposedly a Nazi regime there and so on. It's the same thing he's been saying for, I don't know, the last 10 years. Nothing has changed. Then he even said that 5 hours of talks with Modi tired him out. He's going to keep fighting. So once again, he dismissed Trump's peace initiative, the European peace initiative. Then he went so far as to blame Europe, saying that Europe is also siding with the nationalists. And basically, if Europe goes against him, he'll go against Europe too. In other words, he made it absolutely clear that he couldn't care less about the peace process. This is the most important point. What do you think America's reaction will be? Because again, to be honest, I was expecting some kind of agency from Congress, but there's none. Neither Blumenthal nor Graham are capable of anything at all. Congress is completely impotent. It won't impose any sanctions. And as for Trump, I think he's fine with the current situation. He'll just, honestly, I think Trump doesn't care at all. And that's why our perspective is so Ukraine-centric. His view on things is completely different from ours. So he's not going to impose sanctions on Putin. He wants to do business with Putin, which is why he doesn't react to any of this.
He might not have intended to, but eventually he'll have to. You see, the behavior, Putin's behavior, he'll simply be forced to impose sanctions sooner or later. And by the way, notice that just yesterday, I think Senator Graham was at Trump's place. I mean, he didn't just come over to discuss new turf for Trump's golf course, right? So it's clear that if Graham came, there were certain topics being discussed, because the Ukraine sanctions track against Russia is very important for Graham. They are the most important, the top priorities in his election campaign, which, let me remind you, is already underway. Yes, there will be Senate elections. 1/3 of the seats are up for grabs, and Graham is among those running. And for him to win, he needs to show achievements to his voters. So The question here is whether this current group will become proactive or a new group will come in that will definitely be proactive. And they will show completely different results. Look, do you know who pushes Trump the most to move in an anti-Putin direction? It's his own voters. Just look at their polls. When I repeat, the poll was conducted among Trump voters. That is not among all Americans, not among everyone who voted for anyone, but specifically among those who voted for Trump. And the overwhelming majority of them, over 70%, according to the latest poll I'm quoting, support imposing sanctions against Russia, holding Russia accountable for its crimes, and putting pressure on Russia and Putin. They believe pressure should be applied and Ukraine should be helped to win because Ukraine is right in this war. In other words, Ukraine didn't start it. You see? But that's fantastic. Trump sees all of this. This is exactly what he's watching, what he's paying attention to because he's a showman. He understands that he needs to appeal to the audience, and only if he appeals to them will he be able to stay in power, be strong, and do what he wants rather than what someone else from the outside tells him to do. You see, he'll be forced to listen. It's in his best interest. So I repeat, whether he wants to or not, he'll have to impose sanctions against Russia and he'll have to provide weapons to Ukraine.
It's just that all the time, we have to hold on. Everything always comes with problems, always through difficulties. We just never have an easy path. We always have to overcome something. Putin is playing the same game. You see, thank God nothing is working out for him at the front so far. So what has he started doing? But does he really think Trump is that much of a fool over there? What if Putin starts telling people on TV that he's conquering, that the Russian army has taken yet another Ukrainian city?
A non-existent city that they had drawn before. They made it up on the map, came up with a name, said, here's this Ukrainian city, and here's the next Ukrainian city. Well, that's a good strategy, but like I said, not to the extent that, Trump wouldn't be told or that it wouldn't be checked. I mean, Putin has gotten to the point where he didn't even have time to keep up with the background. With no real successes at the front, he's starting to feed his own people these stories, and apparently he thinks, what if I can fool Trump too? Look, we're capturing Ukrainian cities. Well, wonderful. If they had started doing this earlier, they wouldn't have stopped at Ukraine, of course. They would have already captured half of Europe. They would have taken Poland too, all these non-existent cities. They could report that they've already reached Italy and Germany too, basically. Plus, what other signs are there that things aren't working out at the front, but they really want them to, and yet they just can't force it through like that? Well, look, here's the thing. In Ireland, Russian drones were flying along the route and towards the target of the Ukrainian presidential plane. Well, that was clearly an assassination attempt. What if it had worked out? You see, that's also a hugely important story.
How is that even possible? Tell me, how is that possible in Irish airspace, if I'm not mistaken? Or was it some kind of international airspace?
Ireland.
Explain to me, how could this even happen? I understand that they most likely take off from the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation. Kudos to European sanctions, which can't create any mechanism to track violations of these sanctions. So the shadow fleet is probably operating at full capacity, meaning from one of its ships, these unidentified drones were launched. What's the reaction to this? That's it? Nothing. We just discussed it with you, on the internet. Thanks for the discussion, as they say.
No, thanks that nothing happened, nothing that the Russians wanted to happen, Thank goodness it all turned out this way. But in reality, when Ukraine is now destroying tanker after tanker all over the world, Russian ones, they're actually doing the world a big favor. It's not just our war. We're doing the whole world a big favor because these tankers, besides being used directly for transporting oil products, everything that's under the Russian flag or under other flags but belongs to Russia, we understand what that means. All of this can be used, including for military purposes, and it is used against any country in the world because they infiltrate. Look, it's like any cultural center. A cultural center, I repeat, seems like such a harmless humanitarian name in any country in the world. Wherever Russia is, there's a Russian cultural center somewhere. But this is classic. It's the biggest breeding ground of danger for everyone in that country. Because the only people involved in culture there, you understand, are spies, intelligence agents, those who came to cause harm, undermine, and carry out sabotage in a specific country. So there's nothing at all related to the word culture there. You see, it's not even close to that. But there, specifically, it's the intelligence services who traditionally use Russian cultural centers around the world to push their agendas and accordingly achieve their objectives.
Macron to China. Did you expect anything from this visit? Because obviously I didn't expect anything. The outcome of the talks with China, if we're talking about the international track, Russia's war against Ukraine, is that China officially made a statement: we want the peace agreement to satisfy all parties. To satisfy all parties means that they don't want the war to end at all. Let it go on forever. That's how I translate it from diplomatic language into normal language, you know? I honestly don't understand why Emmanuel Macron went to China at all. Most likely it was about communication regarding trade relations between China and France. That's all. Because from the perspective of the peace process, it was a complete failure.
Macron does have something to offer China, and not just on behalf of France, but on behalf of the entire European Union, since, let me remind you, he only has a couple of years left in office. After his presidential term, he doesn't have the right to run again. He's a young man full of energy and experience. He's set his sights on the presidency of the European Union, and he's already working on it. He's having discussions, consultations, and gathering a team of like-minded people. That's why he went to see Xi already, essentially, as the trailer, a harbinger of the entire European Union, meaning as the head of the whole European Union. This is very interesting for China, and for Xi, it's an incredibly tempting offer to have the opportunity to trade with all of Europe and reap benefits there without obstacles. This is a huge market for China, considering that the economic situation inside China is bad, and as a result, the political situation is also very bad. That's why he needs to deliver some noticeable improvements for his people right now, you see. He won't get that with Russia. Of course, it would be beneficial for him if the war continued. Well, basically, why wouldn't it be? And the main thing is that Putin doesn't use nuclear weapons because that would open Pandora's box. As for everything else, look, Russia is gradually weakening. He's basically taking it over bit by bit and for next to nothing. Everyone else is also preoccupied with this issue, so they don't have time for China or its actions. So in one way or another, everyone is involved in this, and there's something to gain somewhere. You see, the Americans are busy with this and not something else. So yes, that's true, but not entirely, because Macron didn't just come to trade in the literal sense. He came to bargain over this issue as well. In other words, to trade off good relations with the European Union, which include the full spectrum of economic cooperation. These are, I repeat, huge sums of money for China, and it's a very important market, incredibly important. Just like the American market is important. The European market is also incredibly important for China, so he came to trade this for the war in Ukraine. What do I mean by that? Macron asked China to put pressure on Putin so that the war would end, but on terms acceptable to Ukraine. That's what this is about. About Xi Jinping putting pressure on Putin, because he actually has that leverage, as we understand. And if he took such a truly serious, tough, and unwavering stance, then Putin would absolutely have to listen. Because really, if you were to imagine, if the powerful nation of China were to completely leave Russia and simply stop providing any assistance in any way at all, not selling crucial army rations, essential uniforms, vital medical kits, not providing advanced technology or even basic fundamental equipment, not selling sophisticated drones, not selling critical components for their weapons. There are tons and tons of things like that which might seem insignificant, but in reality, they are what keep the Russian economy afloat. All of this still supports Russia. The war depends on it. It's incredibly important. So if he even just... Oh, and look, there's more. There's also the trade in oil products, even if it's at low prices. But who would replace China now if it leaves this market? So the Chinese actually have an incredible number of levers over Putin, and they can easily use them. If they did that, the war would definitely end, and in a way that's good for Ukraine. And Macron decided to make this attempt, meaning he personally went there and he put on one side of the scale, we will do this for you, regardless of whether things with Trump go well or badly, whether he threatens you with tariffs or sanctions, but we're honest. When we make a deal, look, we open everything up. Moreover, you can come into Ukraine, take part in its recovery, in rebuilding, even develop some resources together. All of that will happen too. It's very interesting. For China, that's also very interesting for China. But on the other side of the scale, there's Putin, you see. And soon Dasha will find out what Xi Jinping actually answered to this proposal, to Macron. Because what was said officially, you'll never hear the Chinese come out and say it openly. We're starting a war against these people, or we believe this is the case, and we're going to act accordingly. But that's not their tradition, not their culture. They always do things like this, like this, like this. So we're for all things good and against all things bad. You'll never hear anything more than that. At the same time, what's important is what they actually do, because their actions can be completely different from their diplomatic public statements. That's why I'm saying that. As of now, we don't know the answer, the real answer. What did she say to Macron? And was Macron able to convince him, to give him arguments strong enough for this to happen? But in the near future, by the actions that will begin, by the events that will unfold, we'll understand whether she agreed to Macron's proposal.
Yes, of course, what interests us is whether the sanctions packages in the United States will increase, whether at least Trump himself will do it or Congress. Friends, please like this video, Our Tandem. I know that our male audience especially loves our tandems. So many compliments to Olesia as I read after our streams. Sometimes I even forward them to Olesia. She sends me emojis in response. Friends, thank you for being so active, for watching our tandem, for appreciating us. Every weekend, Olesia and I meet up, discuss the key military and political events of the week, talk about the results, and we are very happy that you watch us. The one and only Olesia Basman, a well-known journalist. Olesia, thank you so much. And as always, see you very next upcoming week.
Thank you, Dasha. Thank you, friends. Yes, we really do read your comments and it makes us happy. So, of course, keep writing them to us.
Don't stop, friends.